I'm very excited to be here. You know, as you just heard, I've spent about 20 plus years designing and launching new experiences in digital. And I like to think of that as inventing the future, because every decision you make about the design of that kind of a product or that sort of service is going to change the reality of the people, sometimes thousands, sometimes millions of people who end up using those services. And so I consider that kind of like designing the future. Everything that you do as a marketer in the digital arena is going to touch the lives of thousands of people, make them better. And today I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that specifically. I see it as an opportunity for leadership, because as digital software begins to define more and more of our society, marketers are going to find that digital technology becomes a more important way for them to communicate with people. It becomes a more important part of the mix. So when the folks at NASCAR and Turner asked me to come here and talk to you about the future, I got excited about it, because in my view, the future, it's not just for geeks anymore. It's actually for everybody, and it's a great opportunity for marketers, because people are excited to find out what's coming next. We've sort of attuned people now to this ever-changing experience. You know, new things coming down the pike all the time, new apps that you can download to your phone. And so people get excited about that. They're looking forward to it. And in a way, science fiction is the new reality. The world that we live in is now increasingly like a science fiction story. It's not surprising at all when you hear about some amazing new innovation. And since here at NASCAR it's all about cars, let me give you one example. So a few years ago, when Google started to introduce these robot vehicles, it seemed like a preposterous notion. Now, since that time, we've seen some tremendous changes happen. Do you know which company is the largest company selling the largest number of autonomous vehicles today? It's not a car company. John Deere, exactly right. John Deere sells the most autonomous vehicles, tractors. Some 10% of their sales now are autonomous or semi-autonomous. And so you're going to start to see robot vehicles enter in unusual and surprising ways. Every major automotive company now has concepts for autonomous vehicles or semi-autonomous vehicles. They all have some kind of robot car program going on. And when you look inside of those cars, what you see is that the design of those cars is very similar to science fiction stories in the 1950s and 1960s, you can see from this illustration on the left there. And so, in a way, we're starting to live through some of the predictions that were made by science fiction writers and science fiction movies just a few years ago, or sometimes a couple decades ago. They're now coming to fruition, and increasingly people expect to have that experience. We've attuned our audience to expect that kind of a thing. I like to think of it as that we're reprogramming the world around us. And the reason I think of that is I call it a software-defined society. It's a world where the software that runs these services actually reshapes the experience that people have. So software is going to become increasingly important. For instance, in a completely different field from automotive, we're starting to find a way to use biological DNA to store massive quantities of data. So here we're merging the biotech field together with the information sciences. In fact, you see all kinds of breakthroughs happening that are defined by information. Here we're using information technology to design new vertical farms that are far more efficient and can be located much closer to urban centers so that they are energy efficient, but they also don't have such a huge carbon footprint on transport for the food. Another example, this was South by Southwest. There's a great article in Wired. I reprogrammed the life form in someone's kitchen while drinking a beer. Fields like synthetic biology allow people to use information science to reprogram biology. One of my big clients is on the East Coast, a big agency, holding company, and they said to me one day, we need to understand the trends that are going to shape our industry for the next 5 years. I said, well, that's an easy question to answer. It's actually quite easy. Just take everything that happened in the information technology industry from the last 10 or 20 years and apply it to every other field, and you can predict with great accuracy what's going to come next. So, for instance, if you deal with anything involving geography, if it's a retail business, transportation, logistics, warehousing, storage, and so forth, your business is going to be transformed by information technology. In some places, you'll be entirely replaced by information technology. We won't need to ship so many bits because most of that business will shift over to the world of electronic technology. Biological science is also changing very quickly. So if you're involved in fields like agriculture or pharmaceutical or healthcare, those are all very rapidly becoming an information science-driven business as well. We're starting to look at the human body and other life forms as an information field that can be reprogrammed. And for companies that are in the manufacturing business, you're also going to be very much affected by two big information trends, robotics and later nanotechnology, which isn't quite ready for prime time yet, but it's coming on very, very strong. So these are the trends that are going to reshape every business in the next 5 to 10 years. Synthetic biology is a field I'm particularly excited about. How many people are familiar with the term? If you're not familiar with the term, it's a field that's a mashup between information science and traditional biology. Biology used to be a wet science that happened in a lab, with beakers and test tubes and stuff. Today, it's done on computers. So if you're a biological scientist, you're probably working on a computer. I have a friend who's a leader in the field, and he said, Rob, I can teach you how to program a life form in 30 minutes. I said, wait a minute, that sounds kind of godlike. Like, how would I go about doing it? I don't know anything about biology. He said, you don't need to know anything about biology. All you need to know how to do is use a mouse and a browser. And I can show you just by pointing and clicking. You can redesign DNA, and then click to print, and it goes to a lab in China, and they actually run a test version of the new life form that you've designed. It's astonishing, but you can actually redesign DNA on a computer today. That's just one example. Synthetic biology is being used for new kinds of oils, new kinds of pharmaceuticals, new kinds of cosmetics, and so forth. Robotics is another field with tremendous change that's happening right now. You'll see robotics leaving the factory floor and coming into the home. Already some examples of that, the Roomba vacuum and so forth. It's a very exciting field. Consumers are excited about it because they can see it. It's very tangible. It's in front of them. One way to think about robotics is the replacement of labor with information. So information becomes a substitute for human labor. Labor used to be something that a person had, like a worker possessed that as a valuable thing in a capitalist economy. But increasingly, labor is becoming kind of like an MP3 track that you can download to a device, or you can download to thousands of devices, and that's going to have some amazing impact, some unpredictable impact on the labor business in the future. Another example, you've heard a lot about 3D printing. If you've used a 3D printer yourself, you know that at home it's still very much a hobbyist game. But 3D printing is being used in industry in some amazing ways. Of course, it's been used in automotive and other fields for many, many years to do prototyping, even at very large scale. But we're starting to see 3D printing now today used for food, for replacement bone parts, customized bone parts that can replace for surgery. Even replacement organs and skin are starting to be developed. I just read recently about a 3D printing being used to make biologically exact replicas of rhinoceros horns. Because, of course, that animal is being hunted to extinction by people who are desirous of those rhinoceros horns because it makes them more amorous or somehow sexy or something. So there's tremendous desire for rhinoceros horns, and they're finding that if they can synthetically produce those on a 3D printer, they may be able to stem the tide of extinction for that particular creature. So some amazing things that are happening. Most of this is driven by information science. We're reprogramming the world around us with software. Now, the funny part about this is most people have no idea how any of this stuff works. It's a kind of magic for them. For instance, going back to automobiles, here's a cool-looking Toyota Supra. How many people know how a internal combustion engine works? Raise your hand if you're coming. Well, that's not bad. Okay, great. You guys could work in the pit crew at the NASCAR race, I'm sure. That's because there's a long-standing tradition, right? In American society, all these red-blooded American males would spend the weekend like grease monkeys working on their cars. That's an old tradition, but now increasingly cars are turning into something that's driven and defined by software. Cars are becoming a giant mobile computing platform. In fact, electric cars, they don't even have an engine in them. And so it's much more akin to a smartphone, and in fact, GM recently said that. Car manufacturers are beginning to look at the car as something that you can enhance with software. You can download new applications and change the features, functionality, personalize the dashboard, and so forth. So we can start to see this idea of software-defined reality happening inside of automotive. It's hardly going to stop there, but that's a very good example of it. So I would say that the information economy, and particularly software, is starting to redefine the world around us. It's reshaping our real world. It's certainly changing customer expectations of the world around them. Another example, okay, so everybody's got one of these in their kitchen, a microwave, and nobody really knows how these things work. We do know that you open the door, you put some food in, you press a couple buttons, and a few minutes later, you take out some scalding hot food and you wait a few seconds for it to cool down. We also know that there's sort of an evil side to this thing. Don't put your cat in there, don't put your hand inside of the thing, there's something weird about it. But if you ask somebody, how does this actually work? How do microwaves heat up the water molecules in food? Most people have no ability to describe that to you. It gets even trippier when you're abstracting things that we take for granted that are part of our infrastructure. Electricity is probably the best example. So somehow we're able to bottle up this amazing natural force, lightning. We can generate it with these things, or we generate it with these things, and somehow transport it thousands of miles over these wires so that we can plug in our groovy electric cars and charge them up. It all kind of happens like magic. And I know this because when you ask an artist to draw electricity, draw how it works, you get a picture like this. If you search the internet and you type in pictures of electricity, you get a picture like this, which of course has no bearing whatsoever on reality. This is a complete artist rendition. It's like fiction here, but you'll see thousands of these images rendered by artists. So we have this sort of like conviction or vision of how we generate and transmit electricity that has no connection to the real world. In some ways, we envision it as like a godlike power. So here you have an artist rendition that kind of recalls that great Michelangelo painting in the Sistine Chapel of God touching Adam's finger and bringing him to life. But this time, it's the human being with the superpowers. We're transmitting that magical power to the electrical light bulb and making it generate. So it's kind of cool to think of ourselves as invested with superpowers made possible by technology. It's kind of cool, but it's also kind of dangerous. It's also a little bit problematic. And that's my talk for today. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. The science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, who also happened to be the inventor of satellite telecommunications, so here's a great example of science fiction becoming reality, he had this great quote, which is that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And this is actually true. We know this because we all have an example of that in our pockets. Everybody's carrying around one of these things, a smartphone. It's basically a supercomputer in your pocket. We carry them around, we use them all day long, but nobody actually has any idea how these things work. We don't really understand how can your phone take your voice and turn it into a digital signal at the same time, take the person on the other line and convert that digital signal into an analog sine wave that you can understand as a human voice. How does that work? How does GPS and location work? When you ask someone, how do you download an app to a phone, they have no idea. In a way, we can all blame Steve Jobs for this because he told us, don't worry about it, it just works, right? That was his magic term for this stuff. His idea of perfection in product design was it just works. Don't peer under the hood. Don't try to go fix this at your home on your own. It's a little black box. It's sealed off. Quite a big shift, by the way, from the origins of the computer business that Apple started in, which is all about hackers creating their own computers. Today, there are these neatly sealed devices that you're not really supposed to mess around with. If you do, you break the terms of use on the software, and you're no longer able to get the warranty coverage. So it just works. Once again, if we look at the artist rendition of how these things work, you see some great examples of magical thinking. So if you type in a search on the web and say, show me how to download an app to my phone, you get pictures like this. And I don't really understand what these guys are trying to convey here, these sort of magic, colorful icons floating. No matter which way you point the screen, you see that they always stay in perfect alignment. But of course, this has no bearing on reality. This is some kind of fantastic idea. In a way, it's weird. It's like, what, the phone comes with these little floating chiclets that are candy-colored, held in balance by some gravitational force field in front of your phone. If you showed this to someone who'd never seen a phone before, they would expect to see this little cloud of colorful dust coming with it. So this shows you that artists have absolutely no idea how a mobile phone works. The challenge here is that a big part of marketing software-driven devices and software-driven experiences is that you're marketing the invisible. You're selling experiences that we can't touch, we can't really see. And that's a really big challenge. That's probably the biggest challenge in the marketing business. As more and more of the products that we sell and the services that we offer become digital, more and more of them will be invisible and intangible. And in a way, it's like you're in the magic business. It's even more like that Arthur C. Clarke quote. You're in the business of selling people something magical. In fact, I think they might want to consider taking the marketing department term and relabeling it, call it the Department of Magic. I don't mean magic like Harry Potter, not that kind of magic with sorcery and wizards and all that stuff. Oh, by the way, notice he's got that same electrical stick there with that magical dust coming out of the end of it. There you have it again. So that's our visual for magic. The kind of magic I'm talking about is prestidigitation, stage magic, a kind of craft, the way magicians do it on stage. There's nothing really magical happening. It's just they choose to show you certain things and they choose to hide certain things. And that is the essence of marketing in the digital arena. 100 years ago, the great stage magicians would come to this city, San Francisco, and they would do great feats of prestidigitation. Harry Houdini made a whole elephant disappear. Well, today, marketers are the new magicians. We're not just making elephants disappear, we're making entire product lines and entire industries vanish into invisible software. Some people call it dematerialization. It's the theme of our time. I personally call it vaporized. It's the title of my book on this subject, and it's a subject I'm passionate about. You see, I'll explain the metaphor for you. When we use the word vaporize, we tend to think of like a ray gun from a science fiction movie. You'd point the ray gun at an object in a sci-fi movie, and that object would disintegrate into a million particles, and it'd be gone, turned into a cloud of dust. It would vanish. Well, today, we are able to make lots of things disappear but you don't really need a ray gun to make them vaporize. All you need is a smartphone. We're turning physical things into invisible software. And this is a wild land grab right now, as thousands of companies are seeking to do this in dozens and dozens of industries, probably in your industry. If your company isn't already developing digital software to replace your physical products, somebody else is definitely going to try to hone in on your business and do that for you. Books have already been vaporized. Amazon sells more digital books than they sell hardback and paperback books combined. Music has already been vaporized. We don't sell discs anymore. Well, we do. But increasingly, consumers are moving over to streaming music services like Deezer, Spotify, and the new ones that just launched. Games business has been totally transformed. The economics of the games business has been totally transformed as well. So as we move into digital arenas, we vaporize things like a physical disc. They have to change the economic model for the game business. This has rocked the traditional game giants. They've had to completely redesign their businesses. The map business has been changed. Do you remember companies like Rand McNally or Falk Publishing? Remember, they were actually companies that published maps for a living for a while, and where are they now? Who knows? The new maps that come with your phone are so much better. And actually, that's an important point. Consumers don't really give up the tangible physical stuff until the new digital version is far better. It has to work much better than the old version. And of course, if you think about the Maps app that comes embedded in your phone, well, it does work much better, right? Instead of trying to figure out where you are on the map, it tells you exactly where you are. It geolocates you immediately. Trying to find out how you get to the next place, hey, it'll give you turn-by-turn directions. And so consumers migrate over to these digital experiences when they are superior, and only when they're superior to the traditional, tangible, physical product. And so now we come to television. TV is going through this process right now of dematerialization into software. And it's a real change. It's a really big challenge for the TV industry. In the old days, you could only get the TV show on a TV set. So the content was bound to that device. But when I launched Packet Video in 2000 and 2001, we introduced the notion of putting video on any kind of a device, no matter where you were. Video anytime, any place. Now, of course, we take that for granted, and billions of people use it. And increasingly, it's the fastest growing segment of video consumption. This is going to transform the economics of TV. I'm not here to tell you that TV is dying. I don't believe that at all. I do a lot of business with the TV companies, and I have a lot of background in television. It's going to be with us for a very long time. But TV absolutely is going to evolve because the customer is evolving. The customer is migrating to new devices. You're going to hear this word omnichannel again and again and again today. Trust me, it's an important term. If you're not already deeply familiar with it, you will be by the end of this day. So for companies that are used to doing saturation marketing campaigns on television, you need to add a few more tactics to your strategy and how you reach people and how you build brand. The second aspect of what's happening to video, not television, but video, is that there are thousands of new mobile apps that completely change our experience of video. These new mobile apps allow us to create and share and distribute video. We can mash up videos, we can manipulate the video. Some of them, like Snapchat and Vine, they teach you that video is a disposable thing. This goes completely against all of our training in the TV industry. We used to think of TV as a precious thing. Now we're finding out that video is actually a disposable thing. You can share it, watch it once, and it disappears. Kind of like that Mission Impossible tape. You know, it just goes, you watch it once, and it's gone. So that's a big shift. Consumer expectations are shifting, consumer experiences are shifting, and all of this is being defined by software. And it's growing really, really quickly. In September last year, Tim Cook announced that the Apple Store has 1.3 million apps. Today, the Apple Store grows by 1,000 new apps a day. There are about 1,000 new games launched each week. And it's not just true for Apple. That's also true for Google. That's true for Microsoft. That's true for every company that offers some kind of app store with their device. They're seeing this surge in software-defined experiences that can be downloaded. And so you can transform the functionality of your device just by clicking a button and downloading something new to your phone. We're not just vaporizing media. We're not just vaporizing the content business. We're also vaporizing hardware. We're transforming hardware. Back in 2002, this BlackBerry pager from Research in Motion was considered a smartphone at the time. Today it looks like an antique. But at the time it was like the power tool, right, for every business executive. And we considered it smart because it took the functionality of 4 different things, your date book and your address book, your telephone, your email, and your pager, and it collapsed them all into a single device. It was incredibly handy, and it instantly made all that other stuff obsolete. Well, fast forward 10 years. By 2002, a standard off-the-shelf smartphone comprised the functionality, the feature functionality, of about 25 different digital devices, including cameras of all sorts, mapping devices, GPS units, voice recorders, you name it. All those devices were collapsed into software and they became absorbed by the mobile phone. And the Japanese companies that made all those consumer electronics, they've experienced double-digit decreases in sales of all of those products since then. So this is a really big shift for the companies that made those physical products. So we're not just vaporizing software, we're not just vaporizing media, we're actually turning physical things into software that can be downloaded to our phone. And this process isn't done. In fact, it's continuing right now as we speak. This is the year for mobile payments. So your mobile phone is going to start to replace the credit card and the other stuff in your wallet. It's going to replace your ID. It's going to replace your access card and your keys. For instance, how many people noticed when you checked into the hotel yesterday that you got a key card that looks like this? This is the key card to my room. It says my days as a key are numbered. Say hello to keyless. So W Hotel is rolling out a mobile app that'll probably use NFC to give you some secure communication with your door so that you no longer need to carry a key card as long as you've got your phone. This is increasingly going to be the case. It'll be the case with our cars. It'll be the case when we rent things. You'll get access through a mobile phone app. If you've used one of those car sharing services, you know that's how they already work, right? They're paired to your phone and your phone provides the access. It just pops the locks on the door and you hop in and the car keys are left inside. Now, on the other end of this process, your phone is connected to, of course, the cloud. We heard all about it from our friends at Microsoft a moment ago. The cloud is another way to vaporize physical infrastructure. It's another aspect of that. Every day, we use services like these: Pinterest, Foursquare, Airbnb, Netflix. I'm sure most of you use some of these services, and many of you probably use them every single day. They all have one thing in common, even though they're very different businesses. Do you know what they have in common? They all ride on Amazon's infrastructure. These companies are sparing themselves billions of dollars of expense invested in hard infrastructure because they can rent what they need. And those are really big companies. But what this really means, what the cloud really means, is it's an accelerant for new businesses. Today, if you start a company, you don't have to invest millions of dollars in rack space and servers and equipment and so forth. You don't have to hire a bunch of technicians to manage that for you. You can put your infrastructure on your credit card. And as your business scales, you can actually scale up the amount of infrastructure. So that means more innovation, more startup companies. More companies are able to enter the field with less upfront investment. And that's a huge shift. So the cloud accelerates this transformation. I say that everything that can be expressed as digital information will be. If there's a component of your business, even if there's information that's embedded inside of your physical product, somebody in your company or at a competitor is going to find a way to unlock that information and deliver it over the digital network. And that's a gigantic shift. It's not limited to the PC. It's not limited to the computer. It's not limited to your tablet or your smartphone. This process now is starting to extend out into the real world. And that's what makes live events really, really important, because we're going to start to see software-enabled experiences happen in the world around us. That's transformative. Let me give you a great example, a retro example. It wasn't so long ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, everybody had one of these things in their house. And you look at them now, and it's a bit of a joke. They look like an antique, right? It's something you would find at a rummage sale or at somebody's yard sale. I mean, they really do look goofy. Can you imagine? But it wasn't so long ago that it was quite normal to walk in a house and someone would be very proud to show you this rig. Like, that's my stereo, And if you're a little younger, maybe you lived in that period in the 90s when we replaced portable boomboxes with these sort of bloated, supersized boomboxes that aren't portable. They're not even really luggable. But that was another version of the same effect. So really big stereo systems were a thing of the past. Every one of these stereos had its own UI. Every one of these stereos had a series of knobs and buttons and dials and touch things that you would have to master in order to control it. That was then. Now look how it's changing. So after the advent of the smartphone, the modern smartphone era, I date it to 2007 with the launch of the iPhone. Of course, there's many other great smartphones made. But once that smartphone hit the market and people started to adopt it and used it as a way to kind of manage all their media, all of a sudden, the look and feel of a stereo changed. Now here you can see an example. It's sort of a hybrid. This is a stereo that has what I call the tyranny of the rectangle. They still have that blue rectangle in the middle, the LED screen. And so that rectangle, that screen, requires them to make kind of a square-shaped device. So that rectangle defines the design of that physical product. So that's why I call it the tyranny of the rectangle, because it's hard to design any kind of shaped surface or curved surface when you had that. But then what happened was kind of interesting as people started to realize the mobile phone itself could be the interface. You no longer needed to have that little blue screen. and you could start to design products that had an entirely different form factor. And so we started to see stereo systems that looked nothing like those old stereos. They just had a dock where you could put the smartphone, plug it in. Sometimes you could put in two. Sometimes they had a hybrid with, still has the screen, but it also has a couple docking stations. Some people like to go big, so sure, you have these ridiculous situations where you have a little tiny smartphone, big, huge stereo. But now we're in a new phase. And now we're about to enter this new phase, which is not about docking stations at all. And this is actually really interesting. The smartphone or the tablet is your way to access a service that lives in the cloud, and it just streams through that device and connects to a Bluetooth speaker. In fact, these services run across all digital devices. So it no longer matters. You don't have to have a particular smartphone with a particular connector. You know how frustrating it is when you check into a hotel and you've got like one model of a smartphone, but the connector that they have in the little stereo room is not the right one. That's all going away now because Bluetooth speakers make it possible for us to completely separate the user interface and the content from the playback speakers. So the speakers can have a completely different form factor. And we're starting to see, finally, a reinvention of the stereo in a way that's completely different from any legacy stereo that you've ever seen. You're starting to see amazing new form factors. These tubes, these things that look like robots. You've got things that look like an infinity sign. These things look like a doormat or something that should be in your shower. These things look like a coffee maker, but they're all Bluetooth stereos. Here's one that looks like a toaster. This one looks like an evil alien's mouth. And if you do want that retro experience of the big, huge, bloated stereo system, well, you can have that too, but now it's an aesthetic choice, right? It's like a retro decision to go back, and you can add that old analog aesthetic if you want that in your house, but you're no longer bound to it. So this transition into software, into user interfaces that exist on one device, has freed product designers to completely reinvent their form factors. Form no longer follows function. Now form can be a pure expression of creativity, a new way to delight consumers as you separate out the information component from the physical component. Of course, it's not limited to stereos. I have this Honeywell HVAC system in my house. I can control my air conditioning and my lights with my smartphone. I can control my stereo from here in San Francisco. I live in Los Angeles. If I fly home and it's like a really hot day, I can turn on the AC before I even get off the airplane and make sure my house is nice and cool by the time I get there. So you have this smartphone interface that enables me to defeat geography. I can actually surmount the bounds of geolocation. I can actually control things that are in different distances. Whatever can be connected will be. Every electronic device is going to be changed like that. And that actually brings us to what I consider to be the biggest opportunity in the world. No surprise here. You've heard it many times. You heard it from the other speakers this morning. It's the Internet of Things. It's a really big deal for us. We know it's a big deal because every analyst and every research report tells us that's going to be the case. We've seen report after report like this, with this classic internet chart that always goes up and to the right, showing us the number of connected devices is going to be in the billions. Now, believe it or not, this is the most conservative projection that I could find. This is from Business Insider, and they project that there'll be about 10 billion devices connected by the end of this decade. Here it shows you to 2018, but their projection goes to 2020, and they project that there'll be about 10 billion network devices by the end of the decade. That's the most conservative projection, which, by the way, coming from Business Insider is saying a lot, because that's not really typically their thing. They're more in the business of hyping up new technologies. We've seen really stupendous and amazing projections from companies like Cisco and others, up to 50 billion or 100 billion network devices by the end of the decade. That may seem kind of extraordinary. Let me show you how big of an opportunity it is. If you look at this chart, you'll see, it's a bit of an eye chart, so I'll explain it for the people in the back of the room. You see that teal-colored line in the middle? That's the Internet of Things. And as you can see, that teal-colored line is bigger than all the orange and blue and red underneath it. Those are smartphones, tablets, and computers. So the Internet of Things will be bigger than the computer industry by the end of this decade. And I think that's quite reasonable if you just think about all the stuff in the world that could possibly be connected. In the next 10 years, we're going to see a radical transformation as computing technology is miniaturized and embedded, and network capability is connecting every device you can imagine. So we'll have wearable devices like eyeglasses and wristwatches and other kinds of wearables, Fitbits and so on, and even implantables, temporary tattoos or permanent implants, projected things on our skin. And they'll connect with other devices like insidables. Insidables are computers that you'll be able to swallow. Sometimes for medical imaging, sometimes for analysis of body chemistry. These are things that will report back out to us wirelessly. They dissolve naturally and they're eliminated by the body. This is a Withings scale. So these devices that we wear are going to communicate with other devices around us, like the scale for health reasons. They'll be able to help us track things. This is a Google Chromecast, which was the #1 selling device in the living room to make devices smart, particularly television sets. Now, lots of other companies, Amazon has just launched a Fire Stick. Microsoft just announced a $140 PC on a stick that's aimed at the Indian market, so a family at home can turn their HD TV into a fully functional Windows computer, which is kind of an amazing thing. $140 to get a PC, to turn your TV set into a PC. You can imagine a lot of people in emerging economies who are going to find that a great gateway to the internet for their families. So we can transform devices that were previously not very smart and make them smart. Here we have a mobile phone with the Android operating system embedded inside of a camera. So here's a camera. They kind of reversed that idea of embedding the camera inside of the phone. Here you have the phone embedded in the camera. So this is a camera that has mobile capabilities. It can communicate. And sometimes these things will be sold in packages. So you'll have a wearable thing on your wrist or on your arm, like an armband, and then a drone that follows you. So when you go skiing and you're doing some stunt, your camera can follow you, and you can record it all and watch it back later, share it on the YouTube. And in Cleveland, in the Cleveland Museum of Art, they have something that's extraordinary. If you ever get a chance to go there, you've got to check it out. They shut down their big Museum of Art and rebuilt it completely and reinvented it. And now when you walk in, there's a whole room-sized display. It's an enormous wall. And the whole thing is a gigantic computer. And it has the physics worked out perfectly so that you can browse through the entire collection, thousands and thousands of objects. And it's fun for me when I go home to visit my mom. I'm from Cleveland. I always stop in to look at it because you get to watch these kids. And it's great. The grade school kids go to this and they gravitate immediately to it. It's the most amazing wall you've ever seen. And you can see them swiping and touching, and they naturally figure out how to do it. It's completely intuitive. And you can see that this is a generation that's going to grow up expecting the room around them and every surface to be a computing surface. That's the expectation. That's the world that we're moving into with the Internet of Things. Amazon's pioneering this idea of an entire building that's a computer. Their new warehouses are fully robotized. They actually bought a robotics company so that their warehouses are like basically gigantic computers. Goods go in one end and they come out the other side. They get shipped out to customers on the other side. Of course, the car has always had a lot of computers. Most cars today have more computing power than the Apollo space system had when they were launching that program in the late 60s and early 70s. But of course, in the future, that autonomous car, that is going to be a software-defined experience. And that car will be a smart car in the sense that it communicates to the city around it. It'll talk to the traffic systems, it'll talk to the weather systems, it'll talk to the safety systems, and all of these systems will be connected together. And so you'll start to imagine a world where everything is talking to everything. It's going to be a freaky world to be in, I can be sure of that. But it's also going to be a transformative experience that will lead to better public safety, better traffic management, better control of emissions, and so forth. So there will be some good to it, but it'll be a big change. The way we're going to connect with all these things is through our mobile phone. A way to think of our mobile phone is it's like the giant remote control in your pocket for the whole world. You'll be able to control experiences that way. People are going to expect to get personalized experiences. This idea of the past, mass marketing, mass merchandising, mass retail, one size fits all, that's an old idea. If you're in one of those businesses, you've got to shift to this notion that consumers have already, which is that everything should be personalized and customized to them. One of the places we're going to see this happen fastest is in beacons. Beacon technology is being rolled out across the United States right now. And beacons are kind of amazing. They're amazing to me. Everyone's familiar with beacons, right? Is there anyone who's not familiar with them? Okay, well, I'll explain it a little bit. This company, Estimode, is one of the companies that manufactures them. There's an industry consortium behind it. Beacons are small wireless transmitters that are going to be installed inside of retail and other shopping arenas. They'll also be in sports arenas. They'll be all over the place. And all the beacon does is it just tells you the location. It doesn't actually record any data. That's important to say because there is some consumer concern about being tracked in a store. People don't like that idea too much. But what the beacons will do, and that's also why they're shaped in this funny shape. They're meant to be very noticeable and visible, so we're not hiding anything. We're not trying to secretly surveil on customers. We're trying to be very transparent about it. What the beacon will do is it'll talk to your phone. And this is very important because as smart as we think our smartphones are, they're actually kind of stupid in one way. Your smartphone doesn't know where it is all the time. Yeah, I know it has GPS in it. And so here's a typical experience. Let's say that you're looking for a store. Maybe you want to find a Best Buy. And you need to get some electronics, you've got to buy a hard drive or something. Okay, so you type in your phone directions or you talk to your phone, you say, tell me where the nearest Best Buy is, and it tells you precisely where you are and precisely how to get to that Best Buy, and then it gives you turn-by-turn directions, and then you park your car, and it knows that you're at your destination, it tells you that. But then the phone doesn't know that you went into the store. And when you're in the store, the phone has no idea what you're doing in the store. You think about that, you go, wait a minute, the phone ought to know this because it knows I was looking for Best Buy, and it knows that I drove to Best Buy, and it knows that I parked my car, and it knows I'm walking around. How can it not know I'm in the store? The beacons are going to connect that loop. They're going to close that loop. They're going to tell your phone where it is with absolutely precise, and I mean down to like a foot of accuracy. So that'll be great for consumers because you'll be able to blast special offers to people. Typical implementation will involve an app, and so you'll opt into the system. This won't be forced on people. You'll opt in, and you'll be able to get a customized experience inside of that retail environment or, say, in a sports arena or something else. Here's an example of how it might work from a company called Signal. They're hardly the only company in the space. There's a lot of companies operating in the space, but I borrowed this graphic because it's a nice way to show how these beacons will communicate with the phone, with the app and the phone, and they'll also connect you to a contactless payment system like Apple Pay, and there'll be data gathered. Tremendous amounts of data will be gleaned from this because now we're going to have super precise ability to understand where people are in the store and what they do in a store. Previously, retailers were completely opaque in this area. They really had no idea what you were doing in the store. This is going to transform retail experiences. So as you walk through your supermarket, you might think of it as a snoopermarket in the future because what's happening already in stores is those cameras that they have in the ceiling. You've seen them in shopping centers. You see them in casinos. Those cameras can actually track where you go. So this is a view from one of those cameras in the ceiling. It's top down, and you can see that they can actually create a path. They can see where somebody moved through the store. That's what the green line is. The pink square shows you where a person is. So they can do that today. Now with beacon technology, what we'll be able to do is create something like a heat map inside of a store. And so we'll be able to glean exactly where customers are going, how long they spend there, how frequently that customer comes back. And remember, this is all opt-in. It sounds a little bit weird, but from a retailer's perspective, this is a tremendous tool. This is how they're going to combat e-commerce. This is how they're going to actually up the quality and the experience of their shopping, of their real-world shopping, to compete with e-commerce. This is absolutely essential for retailers. In the future, retailers will be able to track user behavior as people move through stores the same way a webmaster can track user behavior on a website. You know, if you have Omnichannel or one of those dashboards, you see exactly which pages on a website have the most velocity, where people spend the most time, which ones they access the most. We're very soon going to be in a situation where we have dashboards for stores where we can see the same thing. We can actually track where people are going in real time. And for a mass market retailer with multiple stores across the country, this is going to be an invaluable tool because they'll actually be able to A/B test different store layouts and see which ones perform better. So they'll be able to optimize the yield on every square foot of their store. This is going to help retail in a tremendous way. It's not just limited to that app in your phone or the phone in your pocket. We're also going to be using facial recognition technology. In fact, this is already being deployed in the United States for two reasons: for celebrity shoppers and also for shoplifters. Two completely different use cases, but they're in use today. For celebrity shoppers, of course, it's so that the store management is aware and they can go make sure those people are treated with care. You can also do that for your very best customers. But then for your very worst customers, the shoplifters, well, now the security guys are notified and they can go escort that person right off the premise if they need to. So now you're starting to see stores are taking photographs, faces, of all of the shoplifters that come into the store that they catch. Facial recognition technology is more advanced than most people realize. A couple of years ago, I went to the big retail show in New York, and I was quite astonished to see Emotion. They're not the only vendor of this technology, but I took a picture of this. This is a way for them to analyze facial expressions. You know, computers, artificial intelligence is getting very good at facial recognition technology right now. Emotion can read the emotion on my face. So here you can see me with my camera. I'm taking a selfie, so of course I was smiling. And the system said, that's joy, right? They registered my emotion as joy. Now, if you look at that chart, you'll also notice there's surprise, anger, fear, contempt, disgust. And I suspect as more and more people find out that this technology is being deployed, you'll start to see those emotional qualities spike a little bit in their charts if they don't handle it well. If they handle it really well, it'll be a delight for people because they'll have a personalized experience. They won't need more customer care in the store. The customers will manage themselves. They'll guide themselves through the store. Of course, all of these experiences in retail are going to plug into a contactless payment system, and you're starting to see these deployed now across the country, even on smart watches. A number of companies have introduced this technology. So beacons and contactless payments are rolling out. Literally hundreds of national chains, thousands of stores will roll this technology out this year. So that's going to be transformative. We're going to start to bring internet dynamics into the real world. We're going to start to condition consumers to opt into these experiences because they'll get benefits. They'll get unique benefits from doing so. It's not limited to stores. So, of course, Apple in their recent Worldwide Developer Conference they announced a whole suite of tools, tools for HomeKit that enables you to do home automation. They have a thing called Research Kit that enables you to use your smartphone for medical research and fitness. And in the car, Apple CarPlay will allow you to customize the car experience to use the apps you already have, the apps you already know, the UIs that you're already familiar with on your mobile phone. You can just bring that stuff with you and it'll plug magically into the phone. This isn't limited to Apple by any stretch. I'm not trying to do an ad for Apple here by any stretch. Every major vendor of information technology is moving into this space, so you'll see the same offerings, similar, comparable offerings from Google, Android Auto, Home Automation Kit from Google. Nest is their play for the Internet of Things in the home, smart automation in the home. Nest, of course, is the smart thermostat. They've also introduced a security camera, smoke detector, and so they're trying to create a whole system of smart things. They have about 5,000 developers that are using the Nest API right now to build new experiences, new apps, and so forth, and Android TV. So Google is also playing in this space, but every company plays in this space. Now, here's what's interesting about this. The business model of the web, we've been told by security expert Bruce Schneier, he's a security expert who said the business model of the web is surveillance, which is a little bit weird, but if you think about it, when you go to a website, like a major news site, 60 to 100 companies insert a cookie in your browser. So hundreds of companies, the publishers themselves don't even know who all these companies are, because sometimes it's third-party companies, sometimes it's ad networks that are inserting it on behalf of one of their partners and so forth. And so tracking is ubiquitous on the internet. We're being tracked constantly as we move around the web. And even for smart people who know how to disable cookies, well, they're finding that there are new techniques like canvas fingerprinting that you can't stop, and cookies that you can't remove. So tracking is part of the business model of the web. Publishers need this information. Advertisers demand it. We want to be transparent. We want to be accountable to our advertising partners, so we have to provide that information to them. What's astonishing is that that business model with the Internet of Things is now moving into the real world through these various tracking technologies. So if you haven't yet heard about a concept called the physical graph, this is probably the year you're going to hear about it. We already know about the social graph, right? That's Facebook, all your friends' networks. There's an interest graph. That's, let's say, for instance, Twitter. If you're following a hashtag, if you're following a trend, a breaking trend, that would be part of the interest graph. So these are ways to take people and mesh them with things they're interested in, other people or topics. Now what's interesting is with real-world extensions of this tracking technology, we're going to start to find other graphs that we didn't even know existed. Your location graph, which is a graph of all the places where you've been with your smartphone. That's already being accumulated by companies that have location apps. You know, that information you freely share on your iPhone or your other smartphones. The proximal graph will be all the Internet of Things devices around you that you connect with on a day-to-day basis. All that information will be gathered and gleaned and used by marketers and by other people, sometimes to optimize a service, sometimes to offer you a new service. And together, these form the physical graph. So in a way, one thing to think about is your phone is kind of reporting on you all the time. Most people are unaware of this. I invested in an organization called the Wireless Registry, which is an opt-in registry. It's a way for retailers to handle this in a responsible fashion. And I'm happy to say that the major companies that are providing this tracking technology have all joined into that program, because I think it's so vitally important for us to establish trust with consumers. If we don't handle this well, there's going to be tremendous pushback from consumers. We've already seen some examples, early deployments, where consumers found out and they were freaked out about it. So you have to really tread carefully here. The Wireless Registry is one way to handle that. You see, our phone leaks data constantly. It's constantly talking to the networks that it's connected to. It has to. That's how your mobile phone works. So it's constantly sending a signal to cell towers saying, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. So it's constantly doing that. Also, there's an SSID in that phone, and there's a Wi-Fi number on that phone. And smart retailers know that they can pick up that information and find out when customers come into the stores because they see those numbers appearing. And if they match that data with cash register information, with just 2 visits to a store, they can have a 98% accuracy on linking that SSID in your phone with your credit card number. In other words, they can start to associate that number with the credit card. They can start to figure out who you are. My advice to marketers is don't make the same mistake that the NSA made. This stuff can freak people out. So the art of marketing these digital and real-world hybrid experiences, that's the art of making a skeptical customer care, but don't make them paranoid. Don't make them look over their shoulder. Nordstrom had to pull out one of the early deployments because consumers found out about it and they objected. They went to the management and they said, I don't want to be tracked in this store. So Nordstrom very publicly shut that down. Now companies are going to start to reintroduce it with beacons, but they're going to try to do it in a user-friendly way, opt-in, with real benefits, real visible, tangible benefits to consumers. This is a marketing job because there's a trust gap. You see, there's a giant gap in trust. We trust physical stuff. We trust real-world events. We trust real, physical, tangible things that we can hold. We don't trust digital things quite as much, partly because they break, partly because they're not always secure, partly because we don't know where that stuff actually is going when it goes up to the cloud. And so when they poll US retail customers, they find that there's a giant trust gap. It's the #1 concern about the rollout of these tracking technologies. In New York City, they were going to roll out beacons all over Manhattan. They're going to use old telephone booths that are disabled and turn them into beacons. And the idea was to give people information about what was going on in New York City. Remember, beacons don't record any information. They just say you're here. They just tell your phone where it is. But when BuzzFeed found out about it, they ran a series of inflammatory articles, and consumers freaked out. Citizens in New York City went down and they yelled at the mayor. The mayor finally pulled the plug on the whole project, and they had to step back. So that you can get this wrong, don't get it wrong. Consumers are very concerned about their data. More than half of US citizens had their data spilled last year. 47% of US companies, according to USA Today, had some sort of data spill or data theft last year. 47%, half the companies in the country. This is people's information. You've got to handle it with care. That is going to emerge as the #1 concern for every company that plays in this space. If you're not already there yet, you will be very soon. Sky's marketing chief said, people want to feel served. They don't want to feel like they're being stalked. That's the risk that we run. If we create these things that are too intrusive, too creepy, they track us too closely, we don't know what's happening to their data, there's going to be an insecurity. And remember, people don't know how this stuff works, right? I told you early on about some examples of how people have kind of a supernatural explanation for how electricity or a smartphone works. They're going to come up with supernatural explanations for this stuff too. That won't serve you at all. So you really need to focus on rebuilding trust. These are the top digital brands for consumers: Facebook, LinkedIn, Google. As you can see, they index very poorly when it comes to consumer trust. Now, I'm speaking to you about this because I know that you represent consumer brands that are worth billions of dollars. And you've put billions of dollars of marketing value into those brands, building them up over time. You don't want to end up in this box. Look at that. More people trust the US government a year after those Edward Snowden revelations about how they're downhauling all of your information. More people trust the US government than they trust Facebook with their data. You don't want to end up with those really negative numbers on trust. If you do this right, it will feel like magic. It'll be a great experience for people. The world will respond to them. It'll be personalized to them. It'll talk to them. It'll know them. They'll be recognized. That could feel great. If you do it wrong, it's evil voodoo mischief. And that'll be really hard for everybody in this industry to fix. Trust is at the core. Trust is at the core of this experience. Now, a previous speaker today talked a little bit about Uber, and Uber is an amazing new app. If you haven't used it, you got to check it out. I fly constantly, and I always use Uber. I don't rent cars anymore because there's Uber in every city I need to go. I love it. But Uber is a great example of a company that kind of bungled the trust factor. You see, Uber, there's tremendous pushback against them now. Sometimes it comes from taxi cab drivers who feel like it's unfair competition. Sometimes it comes from their drivers themselves because Uber keeps changing the terms of the deal that they have with drivers. Sometimes it comes from customers, and sometimes it comes from local municipalities, cities who feel like Uber is an unfair player. Uber is a great example of how not to do this. Don't try to foist your digital technologies on communities. You've got to find a way to bring them in, invite them in, make it participatory, and opt in. You want to know the #1 thing people object to with Uber? Surge pricing. Surge pricing. Have you used it? You've got it, right? You know what I mean, right? Like last night, I was trying to get back to the hotel. I was out at dinner. Surge pricing. It's like, 1.5 times. You have to actually confirm now that you understand it. Uber got so much pushback from this. So what surge pricing is, it's dynamic pricing. It's actually a brilliant idea that they borrowed from the internet and they're introducing it into the real world. What surge pricing does, it says, gee, when there's demand off the charts, when there's a lot of people who want a car right away, well, they got to find a way to lure more drivers out, so they keep cranking up the price until there's enough cars on the road. It actually makes perfect sense, and when you explain it to people, they go, oh yeah, I get it, that makes sense. And Uber even gives you an option. It's like, oh, you don't have the money to pay for demand surge pricing? No problem. We'll notify you when the price goes back down, because usually surge pricing is only during rush hour or a peak hour at the end of the night when everybody's leaving the nightclubs or something. So if you've got time and you don't have money, you can just wait and they'll notify you when the price goes back down. But they so bungled the launch of this that there's tremendous pushback against this sort of surge pricing. Now, what's interesting about surge pricing to me is that dynamic pricing is how we do e-commerce. That's always been a part of e-commerce. And so what Uber's actually doing is they're taking a pricing mechanism from the internet, from e-commerce, and they're bringing that into the real world, but they're imposing it on the real world in a way that's created tremendous pushback against Uber. And they've created kind of an obstacle now as they deploy in more and more cities. They have to surmount this resistance that they're encountering. And they're very good at it. I actually have every expectation that company is going to be successful, but I observe that that's one example of taking something that's proven on the internet and imposing it on the real world in a way that creates a lot of pushback. And I think it's a real concern that we all need to be aware of as marketers. And just wait till Uber replaces their drivers with robot vehicles. You're going to see a whole new wave of revulsion and resentment and anger. But nevertheless, that Uber model, as our speaker from Microsoft said earlier, that Uber model is being picked up and used by other companies, many other companies. This is Instacart, they'll do the shopping for you. Airbnb, we already know, they're kind of replacing the hotel with room sharing. All of these are governed by a mobile app. So instead of having to go to a store or having to sign up for a service or something, you manage it all through your phone. Your phone is literally the remote control for the real world. You can order a room, you can order Instacart, you can have HomeJoy come over and clean your house. You can have Amazon now getting into this. They're going to offer a set of approved or accredited vendors, local vendors, which actually is a pretty smart extension of their brand strategy. There's even an Uber for helicopters. If you live in New York, you need to get out to the Hamptons this summer. So we're starting to see a lot of Uber for X concepts out there. And then finally, there's a service called Magic. How perfect for my talk and my theme today of Magic. Magic is like an Uber aggregator, sorry, not Uber, but a meta aggregator across all of these on-demand services. So it's one app to control all of these other services. No matter what you want, you just text it to them, and then they find the right service, and they bring it to you. So you don't have to have 20 or 30 of these different apps in your phone. It's kind of an interesting play. We'll see how that works out. I want to conclude with some thoughts about marketing in a world that's defined by data and information. I know you're already focused on data. I know you're deluged with data already from all of your digital experiences. But as you migrate into these digital real-world hybrids, you're going to find that that increases. And increasingly, data is going to define the kinds of experiences we have. In this hybrid economy of the real world and the digital world, marketing is technology. Technology isn't something you use. Technology is marketing, increasingly. And that's simply because as software grows in importance, and that's a new way for us to engage people, attract people, get them to use our services. Technology is going to emerge as the primary point of contact with most customers. I think there's an opportunity to do great marketing experiences right at this intersection. I gave you some examples just a minute ago, some really bad marketing experiences. But I'm an optimist, and I think we're going to get this right. We're going to scrape our knuckles in the beginning. We'll scratch our knees as we get it together. But soon enough, we're going to figure out how to create these hybrid real-world, digital world experiences. And that's a giant opportunity for marketers. If you're ambitious in your career, I would advise you to master this. This is increasingly going to become what marketing consists of. And if you're really interested in mastering this combination of the real world and the digital world, well, then the best thing you can do is partner with an organization like NASCAR. There's a reason why I'm giving this message to this group of people. You're here because you want to partner together and create great experiences at NASCAR. That is absolutely the right thing to do. The NASCAR audience is the most technologically advanced audience of any major sports. That's been true for 20 years or more. There's a reason why Sprint and before them Nextel were deeply involved, because NASCAR audiences were the first to adopt mobile experiences of all sorts, and that will continue to be the case forever. NASCAR generates a tremendous amount of telemetry data that can be harvested and used. And so what I described earlier about kind of harvesting this fog of data, that's already happening at your NASCAR races. So NASCAR is the perfect place for you to test out these experiences and get them right. This is the perfect place to work with partners to create brand new experiences. Now you might say, well, wait, what about brands? We represent big brands. How do you do that at a big event like this? We're used to doing huge media buys on mass media. We're used to doing saturation marketing campaigns to build our brands. Well, for about 15 years, we've been struggling with this idea of what is a brand experience in an interactive platform, and we use this term brand interaction. And we try to figure out, like, how do you measure engagement? And we haven't been very successful at figuring those things out. I'm here to tell you that the future of brands isn't brand interaction, it's brands in action at live events like NASCAR. Brand experiences that people can actually touch, tangible brand experiences led by trusted people who guide you into those experiences. You have this opportunity at a NASCAR event to turn some of those people in the audience into brand evangelists. You're going to hear all about that in the workshops later on. That's an opportunity to convert your most passionate fans and turn them into people who tell other people how to do it. 15 years ago, I worked with NTT Docomo on the launch of the first video services on the internet, on mobile internet. And at the time, the folks at Docomo said to me, we don't introduce technology at the rate of technology. Technology comes too fast. It confuses people. And we don't introduce technology at the rate that we, a telecom company, want to introduce it. We introduce technology at the rate that people can teach each other. And in Docomo's view, that takes about 9 months. So every time they introduced a new technology, they would let people have it for about 9 months and settle in and break it in as a habit, and then teach each other how to use it. I think that's going to increasingly be true. It's a way to rebuild trust. At an event like a race event like NASCAR, you're able to connect with the influencers at their point of passion, where they're most passionately engaged. And you can build trust by expressing your purpose so that they don't come to some supernatural explanation for what you're doing, like those examples I showed you earlier. They'll come to a reasoned understanding, maybe a scientific understanding of what it is that you're proposing. You have that opportunity at a live event. I don't know any other way to create those kinds of consumers or how to create those kinds of evangelists. And so, to close, I see great challenges and great opportunities, and that's why I think this is a chance for people to be leaders. As we move into this hybrid digital and real-world environment, of course you have to master big data, and you're going to have to find more ways to glean data from user experiences in the real world. Omnichannel marketing means that you have to master multi-screen, and that means you have to master porting across multiple devices and multiple operating systems. That's the fragmentation issue. You have to develop new formats. You can't just take a 30-second spot from television, cut it down into a 15, and bung it onto a phone. That's not going to satisfy people at all. You have to make new experiences that speak to them on that device, their primary point of contact. You're going to have to operate with much greater precision. This is no longer a world of one-size-fits-all or mass media experiences. They're going to be personalized experiences. That's a completely new skill set that we're going to have to develop. We're going to move from huge media buys that are relatively static to real-time interaction experiences. That's a brand new field as well for us. So there's a lot of room for growth and a lot of room for creativity. We'll learn how to master location as that new cookie, that new way to identify people in the real world, in the physical world, and hopefully tailor our messages, tailor our marketing to them. But most importantly, we're going to have to learn how to rebuild trust with our customers. That's the most important message I have for you today. Now, I encourage you to go out there in the real world and create experiences right at that forefront where the digital world connects with the real world. Go create those great experiences. I've enjoyed talking to you today. If you're interested in these ideas, I share more of them in my book, which will be published in September. The book is called Vaporized, and it'll be published on September 18. And I'll stick around for a while. I'll be happy to answer questions for you. Thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you.